66 million years ago, the sky above Earth was clear and blue. And then, in an instant, it wasn't. An asteroid roughly, the size of a city, slammed into what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, releasing energy 1 billion times more powerful than any nuclear bomb ever built. The impact triggered earthquakes, mega-tsunamis, and a firestorm that set forests ablaze across entire continents. Billions of tons of vaporized rock and soot were hurled into the stratosphere, blocking out the sun for months, perhaps years. Photosynthesis collapsed, plants died, and with them, the entire food chain began to unravel. 75% of all species on Earth went extinct. It was the end of an era, the end of the age of dinosaurs. But not everything died. Something survived. Something with wings, hollow bones, and feathers. This is the story of how birds, the last living dinosaurs, made it through the deadliest day in Earth's history. To understand why birds survived, we must first go back, way back, to understand what birds actually are. Birds are not just related to dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs. Specifically, they are avian theropods, descendants of a group that also included Velociraptor and T. Rex. The earliest known bird-like creature is Archaeopteryx, which lived approximately 150 million years ago during the late Jurassic period. Archaeopteryx had feathers, wings, and could likely glide, but it also had teeth, clawed fingers, and a long bony tail, making it a true transitional species. Over the next 80 million years, the lineage of birds diversified enormously. By the time the asteroid struck, the skies were filled with hundreds of species. At this time, there were two major groups of birds: the enantiornithines, often called opposite birds, and the ornithuromorphs, the ancestors of all birds alive today. The enantiornithines were incredibly successful, diverse, widespread, and perfectly adapted to life in the treetops. And yet, after the asteroid struck, every single enantiornithine went extinct. Not one survived. The ornithuromorphs, by contrast, managed to survive. But why them? What made the difference? Scientists have identified several key factors that gave certain birds a survival edge, and it starts with where they lived. The impact winter killed the world's forests. Trees died, and with them, the entire arboreal ecosystem collapsed, canopy gone. Branches bare, no fruit, no insects. Birds that depended entirely on forest habitats had nowhere to go, and nothing to eat. But ground-dwelling birds had a crucial advantage: seeds. Seeds are essentially nature's survival capsules. They can lie dormant in soil for years, even decades. A 2018 study in Current Biology found strong evidence that the ancestors of modern birds were primarily ground foragers and seed-eaters. Exactly the kind of diet that could persist through the collapse. The beak was everything. Birds with robust, thick beaks capable of cracking hard seeds were far better positioned to survive than those with slender, insect-hatching bills. This is natural selection in action, not random luck, but biology meeting catastrophe. The traits that seemed unremarkable before the asteroid became the key to survival. But diet alone wasn't the full story. There was another critical advantage: body size. The birds that survived were small, very small. Most were no bigger than a modern sparrow or robin. This was not a coincidence. Small animals require far less food to survive. In a world where food was catastrophically scarce, a body the size of a fist was a massive advantage. Small body size also means a faster reproductive cycle. A small bird can go from egg to adult in weeks. This rapid generation time allowed populations to bounce back faster. Now let's talk about something remarkable: the bird brain. Or more specifically, what the bird brain could do that other dinosaurs couldn't. Birds have proportionally large brains relative to their body size. This enables complex behaviors, problem-solving, memory, social coordination, all of which became survival tools. Flight itself was another decisive advantage. A bird could cover vast distances in search of food and safe habitat, something no land-bound dinosaur could do. When food ran out in one area, birds could simply fly somewhere else. They were mobile in a way that made them incredibly resilient. Feathers also played a surprisingly important thermal role. In the freezing darkness of the impact winter, a bird could fluff its feathers to trap warm air next to its body. Birds are endothermic, warm-blooded, meaning they generate their own body heat. Unlike cold-blooded reptiles, they didn't depend on sunlight to stay active. This warm-bloodedness, combined with insulating feathers, meant birds could remain active and mobile even when temperatures plummeted after the impact. Now, there's another creature that also survived the asteroid, the mammal. And the story of birds and mammals after the impact is deeply intertwined. Like birds, the mammals that survived were small, omnivorous, and able to hide in burrows or underground, sheltered from the worst of the temperature swings. With the dinosaurs gone, both birds and mammals found themselves in a world of open ecological niches, vacated roles just waiting to be filled. The first few thousand years after the impact were brutal. The sky remained dark. The temperature dropped. Acid rain fell from sulfur released by the impact. The oceans were also devastated. Marine ecosystems collapsed as acidification and darkness wiped out plankton, the foundation of the ocean food web. Shorebirds and waterbird ancestors that could dive for fish or invertebrates in rivers and estuaries had a slight advantage over pure forest birds. Freshwater ecosystems were far more resilient than forests. Rivers and lakes received nutrients from runoff, and their food chains persisted longer. Gradually, over thousands of years, the dust began to settle. Sunlight slowly returned, and with it plants. The first plants to recover were ferns. Fossil records show a global fern spike, a dramatic explosion of fern spores immediately after the impact layer. Birds quickly exploited the recovering fern fields, finding insects attracted to the new growth and unearthing seeds that had waited patiently in the soil. Within about 10,000 years after the impact, forests had begun to regrow. Flowering plants returned, and birds diversified rapidly to fill the new world. This rapid diversification is one of the most spectacular events in the history of life. Scientists call it an adaptive radiation. In just a few million years, a blink of geological time, modern bird groups like ducks, parrots, and shorebirds had already diverged and were establishing themselves. Some birds grew spectacularly large, in the absence of large mammalian predators. The gastornids, nicknamed terror birds in Europe, stood over 2 meters tall. For millions of years after the asteroid, some birds actually filled the role of apex predator, a role previously held by the great theropod dinosaurs. Meanwhile, in the southern hemisphere, the Phorusrhacidae, South America's true terror birds, evolved independently and dominated their continent for 60 million years. These terror birds could run at speeds up to 48 kilometers per hour and used their massive skull like a hatchet to strike down prey. In the oceans, seabirds evolved into extraordinary ecological specialists. Penguins, for instance, lost their ability to fly and instead became incredible underwater hunters. The giant prehistoric penguin Kumamanu weighed up to 150 kilograms and stood 1.77 meters tall, larger than most modern humans. Pelagornithids, sometimes called bony-toothed birds, had wingspans of up to 6.4 meters, making them the largest flying birds ever known to science. Back on land, the Paleogene forests were being repopulated with an astonishing variety of birds. Songbirds, raptors, parrots, herons, the modern world was taking shape. The rise of flowering plants was a key driver of bird diversification. As fruit-bearing trees evolved, birds evolved to eat the fruit, and in doing so, spread seeds across the landscape. This is called mutualism, a relationship where both species benefit. Birds got food, plants got their seeds transported and dispersed far and wide. Birds also co-evolved with flowers for pollination. Hummingbirds are perhaps the most famous example of this deep evolutionary partnership. So, what do we actually know about the specific birds that survived the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary? The fossil record gives us important clues. The vegavis is one of the most significant finds, a late Cretaceous bird discovered in Antarctica that appears to be a close relative of modern ducks and geese. The discovery of vegavis proved that at least some modern bird lineages, neonites, existed alongside the non-avian dinosaurs before the asteroid hit. Molecular clock studies, which use the rate of DNA mutation to estimate when species diverged, confirm that many major bird groups were already separated by the time the asteroid struck. So birds weren't just lucky. They were already well positioned by evolution before the catastrophe arrived. But let's be clear, it was still enormously difficult. Many bird lineages that existed before the asteroid did go extinct. Survival was not guaranteed. The survivors appear to have shared a combination of traits: small size, ground foraging, seed-eating diet, aquatic or open habitat lifestyle, and high cognitive flexibility. It's also important to note what birds shared with the dinosaurs that didn't survive. They both reproduced by laying eggs, but birds incubate their eggs and provide intensive parental care, keeping the eggs warm through the cold impact winter. This gave their chicks a fighting chance. Contrast this with many large dinosaurs, which may have buried their eggs and relied on environmental heat for incubation, a strategy that failed when temperatures plummeted. Let's now zoom in on the actual structure of the Chicxulub impact, because the scale of this event is truly mind-bending. The Chicxulub crater is approximately 180 kilometers wide. The asteroid that caused it was roughly 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter, about the height of Mount Everest. The impact vaporized sulfur-rich rock at the site, releasing an estimated 100 to 500 billion tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. Sulfur dioxide reacts with water vapor in the atmosphere to form sulfuric acid, causing the acid rain that devastated ecosystems across the globe. The initial shockwave from the impact would have generated winds far beyond anything a hurricane could produce, flattening forests for thousands of kilometers. Ejecta, superheated rock fragments launched into orbit by the impact, rained back down across the entire globe, briefly setting the atmosphere ablaze. Animals that could burrow underground, dive into water, or shelter beneath rock, even briefly, had a critical advantage in those first terrifying hours. Waterbirds and shorebirds could have dived into rivers, lakes, or coastal shallows to escape the infrared heat pulse, a brief but lethal surge of radiant heat lasting up to 20 minutes. This heat pulse was estimated to be intense enough to ignite dry plant material on the surface, essentially flash cooking anything exposed above ground. The story of bird survival is also a story of luck. The right place, the right time, the right diet. Millions of birds died. Only a handful of lineages pulled through. From those few survivors, all 10,000 species of birds alive today are descended. Every eagle, every penguin, every sparrow, every flamingo, all trace back to those few. Modern birds display extraordinary diversity of form and function. Let's take a moment to appreciate just how remarkable this range is. The bee hummingbird of Cuba is the world's smallest bird, weighing just 1.6 grams. The wandering albatross has a wingspan of over 3 meters and can fly for years without landing. The ostrich cannot fly, but can run at 70 kilometers per hour, faster than a horse. It is the largest living bird and lays the world's largest eggs. The Arctic tern makes the longest migration of any animal on Earth, flying from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back, covering 70,000 kilometers every year. Crows and ravens have been shown to use tools, plan for the future, and even recognize individual human faces, cognitive abilities once thought unique to primates. Parrots can learn hundreds of human words and understand context. Their intelligence rivals that of a 5-year-old child in some cognitive tests. The fact that birds have such large and sophisticated brains is itself a legacy of their dinosaur ancestors. Theropods like Troodon were already showing unusually large brain-to-body ratios. Bird songs are another remarkable feature. Bird song is one of the most complex forms of vocal communication in the animal kingdom, learned through experience and cultural transmission. The ability to learn songs, called vocal learning, is a form of cultural transmission that birds share with only a handful of animal groups, including humans, whales, and some bats. Now, let's consider the birds we see today and trace them directly back to the aftermath of the asteroid. The neowaves, which includes most modern bird orders, appear to have exploded in diversity after the impact. The paleognathi, the group that includes ostriches, emus, kiwis, and rheas, represent an ancient lineage that also survived and radiated after the extinction. Interestingly, the distribution of ratites, the large flightless birds like ostriches and emus, across the southern hemisphere continents was once thought to be evidence of Gondwana's breakup. Modern genetic analysis revealed a surprising truth. Ratites actually spread to these continents by flying, and then independently lost flight on each landmass. This is convergent evolution, the same trait, loss of flight, evolving independently multiple times in unrelated populations on different continents. Why lose flight? Because on islands or continents with no predators, flight is energetically expensive and unnecessary. It's a dramatic example of use it or lose it, evolution. Perhaps most fascinatingly, birds carry their dinosaur ancestry visibly in their bodies. Look at a chicken's leg. Those scaled feet are a direct visual echo of their theropod heritage. Scientists have even induced dormant dinosaur genes in chicken embryos to grow snouts instead of beaks and longer ancestral tail vertebrae, proving the genetic blueprint is still there. This tells us something profound. Birds are not merely descended from dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs with modified gene expression. The dinosaur is still in there, waiting. So when you next hear a bird sing outside your window, remember, you are hearing a dinosaur, a creature whose ancestors walked beside the greatest giants that ever lived. The asteroid that killed the non-avian dinosaurs was among the greatest catastrophes in the history of life. But it also opened a door, and birds walked through it. The key lessons of bird survival are timeless. Flexibility matters, diet breadth matters, mobility matters, and body size matters when the world changes suddenly. These same principles apply beyond biology. In any sudden catastrophe, environmental, economic, social, the survivors tend to be those who are small enough to adapt quickly. Today, birds face new threats: habitat destruction, climate change, and invasive species. Scientists are drawing on lessons from the KPG event to understand what makes populations resilient. Approximately 3 billion birds have been lost in North America alone since 1970, a staggering decline across almost every species group. Birds have survived extinction before, and their adaptability gives scientists hope that conservation efforts can still turn the tide. Understanding how birds survived the asteroid isn't just a lesson from the past. It's a guide to protecting them in the present and ensuring they're here in the future. 66 million years ago, a small feathered creature pecked at seeds in the ash of a dying world. Today, 10,000 species fill every corner of the planet. The dinosaurs are not gone. They never left. Every morning, they wake up outside your window and they sing.